The ceasefire is holding. There have been some violations, but generally speaking, it can be said that it is holding at this time. As you know, as a result of the UN resolution which was agreed to yesterday by a vote of 14-0, a peacekeeping force will go to the Mideast, and this force, however, will not include any forces from the major powers, including, of course, the United States and the Soviet Union. The question, however, has arisen as to whether observers from major powers could go to the Mideast. My up-to-the-minute report on that, and I just talked to Dr. Kissinger 5 minutes before coming down, is this. We will send observers to the Mideast if requested by the Secretary General of the United Nations. And we have reason to expect that we will receive such a request. With regard to the peacekeeping force, I think it's important for all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and particularly for those listening on radio and television, to know why the United States has insisted that major powers not be part of a peacekeeping force and that major powers not introduce military forces into the Mideast. A very significant and potentially explosive crisis developed on Wednesday of this week. We obtained information which led us to believe that the Soviet Union was planning to send a very substantial force into the Mideast, a military force. When I received that information, I ordered shortly after midnight on Thursday morning an alert for all American forces around the world. This was a precautionary alert. The purpose of that was to indicate to the Soviet Union that we could not accept any unilateral move on their part to move military forces into the Mideast. At the same time, in the early morning hours, I also proceeded on the diplomatic front. In a message to Mr. Brezhnev, an urgent message, I indicated to him our reasoning, and I urged that we not proceed along that course, and that instead that we join in the United Nations in supporting a resolution which would exclude any major powers from participating in a peacekeeping force. As a result of that communication and the return that I received from Mr. Brezhnev, we had several exchanges, I should say, we reached the conclusion that we would jointly support the resolution which was adopted in the United Nations. We now come, of course, to the critical time in terms of the future of the Mideast. And here, the outlook is far more hopeful than what we have been through this past week. I think I could safely say that the chances for not just a ceasefire, which we presently have, and which, of course, we have had in the Mideast for some time, but the outlook for a permanent peace is the best that it has been in 20 years. The reason for this is that the two major powers, the Soviet Union and the United States, have agreed, this was one of the results of Dr. Kissinger's trip to Moscow, have agreed that we would participate in trying to expedite the talks between the parties involved. That does not mean that the two major powers will impose a settlement. It does mean, however, that we will use our influence with the nations in the area to expedite a settlement.